Breaking news in the mystery disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has just confirmed shocking new information about the ransom notes that have haunted this case. For the first time, we're seeing the actual ransom notes from law enforcement, plus a chilling development that police seem to believe this was no spur-of-the-moment crime. The suspect may have stalked the home, studied the scene, and waited for the perfect moment to strike.
They said she perished. Just like that. Perished shortly after she was taken. That's a quote pulled straight from the second ransom note released by the Pima County Sheriff's Office. You know, the one they didn't want you to read right away. The one they sat on for 6 months. And look, I need you to stay with me here because what they just dropped into the public square changes everything we thought we knew about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. We're not dealing with a simple burglary gone wrong. Not anymore. This is colder. This was planned. And you already know what I'm about to say. The official narrative has more holes than a fishing net, and we are the ones left trying to stitch it all together from the scraps they decide to feed us. Here's the breadcrumb that breaks the whole thimpen. Authorities now admit the chilling video of that masked figure on Nancy's front steps, the guy with the backpack they leaked months ago, might actually be from 2 separate nights. 2 different nights. Read that again. We all assumed it was a snapshot of the crime in progress, a single moment of opportunity. But the sheriff's own press release now says these videos indicate he took steps to prepare for the event. That's not a random predator strolling through a neighborhood looking for an unlocked door. That's a reconnaissance mission.
Right now are the videos and the images initially released by Kash Patel, the FBI director, of that person in a mask, seemingly armed, on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. And people may remember that this was video they said had to be extracted from, because Ring, if you don't pay for a particular service, it doesn't get saved to the cloud. It had to be extracted. So there wasn't a lot of information surrounding like when this video was taken. You know, we know from times of when it was, you know, turned off, but in terms of when that video and this person was actually on her front steps, like that wasn't clear. But now they're saying, quote, 2 videos recovered from Nancy's doorbell camera may be from 2 separate days. These videos are critical to our understanding of the unidentified male's behaviors and choices. They indicate he took steps to prepare for the event on the night of January 31st to February 1st, which is so chilling to think about this not being, because there was that theory out there of maybe they just hit a house, it was a burglary, and, you know, they didn't know that Nancy was going to be there.
They cased the place.
When you, if this actually happened on 2 separate nights where they get this video, it shows that maybe there was more planning than some people thought when it came to targeting, and we don't know particularly the motive yet, but certainly targeting someone with a daughter who's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of planning that actually went into this. That's my feeling. Just the fact that you would go there prior to the crime to case the place and see what you're going to be up against. I find that to be really interesting. And, you know, there had been some reporting, as you said earlier, sourced reporting earlier in this case, talking about how the fact that
they studied the floodlight, the one that ended up smashed. They knew about the white smartwatch on the floor next to her bed. Details only a person standing in that room would know. The FBI, the sheriff, they aren't just asking for tips anymore. They're begging you to look at your neighbor, your brother, your coworker, and ask yourself if their behavior changed in early February. Did they suddenly shave a mustache? Did they scrub their truck down at odd hours? These are the signs of a cover-up hiding in plain sight, and the reason for that, well, you'll see. Now, let's talk about the paper trail. Actually, wait, let's talk about the words themselves, because the devil is in the phrasing. 2 ransom notes exist. One is a cold-blooded business transaction. The other is a guilt-ridden eulogy. The first letter, sent to a local TV station and TMZ on February 2nd, is pure ice water in the veins.
Of the DNA on the hair, very interesting to me. Very interesting, because it sounded like they were hanging their hopes on that DNA testing that was going on with that hair, the rootless hair. And it sounds like nothing came of it. So I think that they are going to talk only when they feel like it's beneficial to the investigation, because Sheriff Nanos has only spoken a few times to certain local media outlets. He hasn't really done a lot of big national media interviews recently. So there could be a couple of reasons why they decided to release this material at this time.
Yeah, and I think about Sheriff Nanos in the wake of Savannah Guthrie. She released, that video earlier this week,
Yep.
which was really the first one in a while, kind of that selfie style that we saw early on in the investigation, asking whoever took her mom to do the right thing. And then he responded saying that they still had a lot of DNA to go through. And it doesn't appear to this point that turned anything up. Let's get to, so we have these two ransom notes that we are now reading directly from the sheriff's office. The second one, I don't think we've actually seen for ourselves yet. So I'm going to read that here in a second, but we'll start with the first one. So bear with me as I read through this, and we'll put this up on the screen. Hello, Savannah. We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. She will be held for ransom, and once payment is received, she will be released unharmed. We will be holding her for a maximum of 7 days. You will need to send Bitcoin in the amount of 4 million USD before 5 p.m. on Thursday the 5th. If payment is not received, the ransom will be increased to 6 million USD, which will need to be paid by 5 p.m. on Monday the 9th. Once payment is received to the Bitcoin address below, she will be released within 12 hours of deposit to a safe drop-off location back in Tucson. If payment is not received by the last deadline on Monday the 9th at 5 p.m., she will be killed. Your mother is aware of this, and her life is in your hands. It is in the best interest of everyone to have this completed as soon as possible. You will not be able to contact me from here on out. There will be no negotiation. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. And then
We have your mother, Nancy. She is safe but scared. Do not play games. Law enforcement will not be able to help you. They even spelled received wrong, spelling it received, which feels like a breadcrumb in itself, or maybe just arrogance. But here's what makes the hair on your neck stand up. They demanded 4 million in Bitcoin and insisted on calling it USD. Nobody talks like that.
That first one that stood out to me too, before we read that second one, USD. Because I just think like nobody says USD if you're in the United States. You would just say, 10 million, $6 million. And the border, you can cross into Nogales, which is just like an hour south of Tucson. I've actually crossed that border, and it just stood out to me like how easy it is to get across too. The border may open, I think, at like 6 a.m., but like they're not checking papers on the way across. So you just wonder like if they were able to get over the border, just how easy it would be to, it's not like coming back where they actually go through your passport and everything.
Nobody in the States writes a note and says send 4 million USD. You just say dollars. That phrasing crosses a border. It feels foreign, or it feels like someone pretending to be foreign to throw the dogs off the scent. They told the family not to call the cops while sending the note directly to media outlets where the cops were already standing. It was a performance.
Yeah, they may have some validity. I've always wondered if these notes were a cover to buy time to cover up a homicide. I don't know that, but it's always been a thought of mine. Obviously, they're releasing these right now for a reason. They didn't do it before then, or before this time, rather. The 6-month anniversary of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance is here. It's upon us. And so I think there are some interesting things in this note, how they're saying, don't call the cops. They're not going to help. They cannot help you. They are very adamant and certain of this. The cops had already been called. The cops had already been called by the time these notes were sent. These were sent to local TV stations and to TMZ. The cops were already aware.
Right.
That's how the cops got these notes. So I find that to be very curious. And that's why it makes me wonder, are these simply a cover and a reason and in a way or an attempt to buy time to cover up a murder? That is a thought of mine. What I also find interesting about this, we have a misspelling. I'm going to point that out. Received is spelled incorrectly in this note. And, do not play games. Law enforcement won't be able to help you. But they do offer those details, those 2 details to say, look, we're serious. Go look at the floodlight. We know where we left the watch, etc.
But it's the second note that exposes the true sickness in this case. 4 days later, on February 6th, a completely different voice emerges. This time it's addressed to the entire Guthrie family. The tone is soft, apologetic.
Let me read through this second note. And it starts very differently. And the tone of this is noticeably different from that first one. It's much shorter as well. Guthrie family, we did not fully grasp the seriousness of her physical condition. We never intended to hurt her. That was not our intention. She perished shortly after she was taken. We believe it was heart-related. She is buried in nature now. Nothing you could have done could have changed the outcome. We want your family to know this and hope you all can find peace. We are truly sorry. Right off the bat, I mean, just even addressing the Guthrie family, where the first note was Savannah, and now it's the entire family. And we know that she had like heart issues, and that was a concern. She had health problems, but very different tone in the way of this, saying that they didn't want to hurt her when that is so different from what they said, if this is the same writer in that first letter.
Yeah, it's a very different tone. And I don't know many, I don't think I've ever seen a kidnapping case, and we don't see that many kidnapping for ransom cases. They seem pretty rare, where somebody would say, oh, we didn't mean to do this. We didn't mean to hurt her. Well, you've already threatened to kill her in the first note. You already said you would do that if you didn't get the Bitcoin. And so it's a much different tone, saying she's buried with nature. I mean, I don't, that's not how people talk. I've said,
we did not fully grasp the seriousness of her physical condition. We never intended to hurt her. She perished shortly after she was taken. We believe it was heart-related. She is buried in nature now. We are truly sorry. Let that sink in. You threaten to execute a woman if her famous daughter doesn't pay a digital ransom. Then 4 days later you're sending condolences. Buried in nature. That's not how a cartel hitman talks. That's not even how a hardened kidnapper talks. That is the language of guilt. That is the language of someone who knew her.
I've said this before. Nobody talks that way. I mean, it's got a different tone to it. So it makes you wonder, was somebody using Chat GPT to write these, AI or something? But, we are truly sorry. And there's nothing you could have done. Well, you said before she'd be fine if he paid the money, the millions of dollars in ransom in Bitcoin. So I find this to be very curious, and it makes no sense to me at all. These are two different styles, two different tones. And was this to try to make somebody in the family, the entire family, feel better because they hadn't paid that money? And, you're trying to put somebody at ease. Why? I think that's what kind of hardcore kidnapper does that?
Maybe not a close friend, but someone who saw her as a human being, not just a pawn. Just like I know, if a stranger grabs a 75-year-old woman for money and she dies of a heart attack during the snatch, they dump the body and run. They don't send a poetic apology about finding peace. They don't care if you have closure. This second note wasn't written for the family. It was written to soothe the writer's own rotting conscience. Here's where I need to slow down and talk directly to you. Not as a narrator reading a script, but as people who see this broken system for what it is. We've watched this investigation limp along for half a year. We saw the FBI director, Cash Paddle, push out that grainy video of the Porch guy, a figure that half the retired agents on social media called an absolute amateur.
I just keep thinking back to and we have great law enforcement experts. And I just remember in the beginning, when that video came out of Porch guy, and how many of them, former FBI agents, former, major city law enforcement, would say this guy just looks like an absolute amateur, right? Like it's the backpack, and he's got this mask that you can still kind of see parts of his face. And it's it does look like a guy where if you were to AI, hey, what does a burglar look like? I mean, that's the Halloween costume. And yet you've had everybody from Donald Trump pushing this, Kash Patel, the resources of the FBI, all these different agencies seemingly putting a ton of effort into trying to find it. And it just blows my mind that here we are 6 months later.
We saw the sheriff, Chris Nanos, record a Safi-style plea practically begging the kidnapper to search his soul. Meanwhile, we hear whispers of turf wars. The FBI says the sheriff's office burned 4 precious days before calling them in. The sheriff says they've been the lead agency the whole time, sifting through rootless hair that yielded no DNA match.
A big update coming in from the Pima County Sheriff in Arizona related to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. We are seeing for the first time from law enforcement the 2 ransom notes that were sent to media outlets at the beginning of all of this, when Nancy Guthrie was taken from her home in the middle of the night, and also the sheriff raising some questions about when the videos were taken of that mysterious figure on Nancy Guthrie's front steps. And there is a possibility that those videos, according to the sheriff, were taken on different nights. There's a lot to break down. This is really the first time in a while we have received information directly from the Pima County Sheriff. Joining me now to help talk about all of this, Anjanette Levy, host of Crime Fix here on Law and Crime. Anjanette, thanks for doing this. I know you've been following this case as well. Before we get into the ransom notes, what do you make of the timing of all of this to release this information today? There was the report that came out that some DNA of a hair fiber didn't really turn anything up.
Right.
And then a couple hours later, you have this pretty large press release coming in about the ransom notes, and then also information potentially about the person at the front steps.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. I think the timing is intentional. I think that this could mean a couple of things. It could mean that they really are at their wits' end and they have no choice, or feel they have no choice but to release this information, hoping that somebody will see these notes and possibly maybe recognize the writing, or possibly this is intentional because they're trying to see how a potential suspect might react. And so there are a couple of possibilities here. The fact that they're saying that hair, that nothing came of the DNA on the hair, very interesting to me, very interesting, because it sounded like they were hanging their hopes on that DNA testing that was going on with that hair, the rootless hair.
And now, 6 months later, they're releasing these notes like it's a grand revelation. It feels like a Hail Mary.
You read that, and there's a lot of it is kind of like, we've seen that in stories before of like what people should be looking for. I just wonder, realizing right now, as I say, it's like, this is 6 months since she went missing. Like where was this maybe back 6 months ago? Like, why now making this call out to the public? Because they put out the videos and then kind of the news conferences stopped. And then now 6 months later, you just worry that they're really in this place where they're just hoping the phone call comes in with the tip that cracks this case.
And that could be their hope. I mean, this could be a sign of desperation. It really could. The 6 month anniversary is here. They know there will be media coverage. It's been 6 months, and maybe they just don't have any strong leads. So they just say, we're just going to drop it out there and see what happens, because we need to solve this.
It feels like the case files are cold on the desk, and they're hoping the public can do what the task force couldn't. It makes me angry, honestly. A woman is gone. A daughter is left recording videos on her day off from the Today Show, speaking softly into a camera, aiming her words at one specific person who she believes still has a soul. And we're sitting here decoding spelling mistakes. And this is the part nobody talks about. The media focused on the ransom, the Bitcoin wallet, the border crossing theories. But look at the psychological shift between Note 1 and Note 2. The first is a wolf. The second is a lamb. I've always believed there was more than one person involved. The video shows a cold operator, sure, but that second letter reveals a follower, a reluctant participant. Savannah Guthrie's recent video message wasn't addressing a mastermind. She was looking past the monster to reach the man with the guilt. She's smarter than the rest of us. She knows there's a weak link.
I do think the video from Savannah was very interesting the other day. Chris, you brought that up. The fact that she seems to be talking to one person, she's directing this at somebody. And so, I don't know about you, but I've always thought there was more than one person involved in this. And so that may be why these notes sound so different, as if they are in fact legitimate and authentic. And so I think that she is speaking to one person who she may think actually has some empathy and some heart, while the first person who may have written this first note does not. And so she's hoping that person will just, their conscience will get to them. And she's saying it's never too late to do the right thing.
She said, and I quote from the transcript we analyzed, "You need to be held accountable, but I also believe there might be a part of you that wants to do the right thing." She's talking to the author of the second note, the one who said, "Nothing you could have done could have changed the outcome." That's a lie they tell themselves to sleep at night. But guilt doesn't work that way. Guilt is a slow acid. It burns. They released a list of red flags today.
They did release another thing and hoping that people will revisit that video, knowing it might be from a couple separate nights. And this is kind of a, hey, somebody out there has to know something, which that certainly isn't breaking news. But they listed an interesting collection of ways, and this may be just the general way you put it out when you're looking for someone who may have been involved in a crime, but for the public to think about people, especially if you live in the Arizona, Tucson, Pima County, wherever it may be, and you see a change in the way that somebody acts, that could be a red flag, that maybe they had something to do with this. So I'm just going to read these off. They say a change in mood or displays of anxiety, nervousness, or irritability, a change of physical appearance, hair color or cut, growth or removal of facial hair, etc., unexplained injuries, cuts on hands, bruises, etc. During the period Nancy was last seen, normal routine changes like missing work, classes, appointments, sudden departures from the area around the time of her disappearance, vehicle cleaning or repairs, unexplained interest or disinterest in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, noticeable intense interest or disinterest in the investigation, or an unexplained knowledge of the situation.
Anxiety. Unexplained injuries. A sudden need to clean a vehicle at 3 a.m. Someone out there scrubbed that car. Someone shaved a beard. Someone stopped going to church or started going 3 times a week. Someone knows. They exposed those ransom notes for a reason. They want you to read the phrase, back in Tucson.
Which is another part of it, which like my mind just went to Mexico initially, but then I remember that was asked of the sheriff early on, and he kind of, not that he brushed it off on purpose, but the way law enforcement talked about it in news conferences was, well, we're in touch with our counterparts in Mexico, but it never seemed like there was a ton of resources, at least visibly, on the other side of the border looking for Nancy Guthrie.
It didn't appear that way. But the whole back in Tucson part of it, I mean, that could be Mexico. It could be another city in Arizona. We simply don't know. But I think the USD part of this is a very big clue. That is not the way that Americans write and talk about currency. Nobody talks like that. So it could be somebody in Mexico. Again, these could be fake, but
They want you to see the misspelling. They're hoping a wife recognizes her husband's awkward phrasing, or a boss remembers a worker who disappeared for a few days in early February with cuts on his hands. This wasn't an accident. Not an accident at all. This was a targeted extraction disguised as a bungled robbery. They destroyed the floodlight. They knew where the watch was. They knew who her daughter was. And when the plan fell apart and Nancy's heart gave out from the sheer terror of it all, the 2 personalities behind the crime fractured. One panicked, one stayed cold. And now, 6 months later, the silence is deafening. We have a task force that looks like it's running on fumes, and a grieving family reduced to parsing the linguistic quirks of a kidnapper's poetry, buried in nature. It sounds peaceful. It's a grave hidden from the eyes of justice. So here's the question that keeps me up at night. It's the question I'm leaving for you in the comments below. If the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff can't track a $6 million Bitcoin trail, if they can't trace an IP address from an email sent to TMZ, and if they admit the suspect was prowling the neighborhood on multiple nights without a single neighbor seeing a license plate, are we looking at a criminal mastermind? Or are we looking at a cover-up that was always meant to look like a kidnapping, because the truth was even more sinister? If you see the guilt in someone's eyes, the nervous twitch when Nancy's face hits the screen, you don't need a warrant to do the right thing. You just need a backbone. Justice for Nancy isn't buried in nature. It's buried in silence. And it's time we dug it up.